Good evening and welcome again to another Community Empowerment Hour presented by the Lightbearers Mission Seventh-day Adventist Church in Suitland, Maryland. We're so happy that you have chosen to join us this evening. And whether you are a novice in gardening or you're an avid gardener, you will learn and be very pleased that you joined us this evening. Before we get started, please join me with a prayer to invite the presence of the Holy Spirit. Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, for bringing us together this evening. We ask that you will be here and guide the discussion this evening. We pray that those that are present will be blessed and that they will be able to share the knowledge acquired this evening with others to bless them as well. We thank you for our special guests. We ask that you will continue to bless them and that you will anoint their lips, that the things that are said will be in accordance with your will. We ask all these things in Jesus' name for his sake. Amen.
Amen.
And once again, we want to thank you and we welcome our very special guests, John and Ayanna Shepard. John and Ayanna left the DC metro area in 2017 to move to Bedford County, Pennsylvania. During their first year, before fully settling into their new life, they took a 4-month medical missionary course at Meet Ministries in Tennessee, as well as Bob Gregory's 1-week course on the importance of the soil at Berea Gardens in West Virginia, later that same year. John and Ayanna are also continually assessing a wealth of knowledge on the internet. They enjoy learning how to put this knowledge into practice. And within their fenced 1.5-acre garden, they currently have a small orchard of perennial fruit trees, bushes, and small berry plants. And each year they rotate their crops of various vegetables. This evening, they're going to share a few of the things that have worked for them, as well as some mistakes that they have made along the path to help us. And at this point in time, I'd like to welcome them. And the next voices you will hear will be that of John and Ayanna. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Terry, and thank you, LBM, for sponsoring us. We're happy to be able to share with you some of the things that we've learned. And without further ado, we're going to get started. And John's going to share some things with you. John is going to share some things with you on the most important things that we do when you're gardening.
Yes, good evening. I'd like to start out with this thought. You know, the Bible tells us that in all our ways, we should acknowledge him, the Lord. And in Proverbs 18:22, it says, he who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor with the Lord. And I wanted to share that just because my wife is a wonderful person, and no doubt without her diligence for this program tonight, I certainly wouldn't have too much to say. She did a lot of research, and so I definitely appreciate the gift of God. But also the thought that starting out with in all our ways acknowledge him, it's a good admonishment because we have a tendency to forget the Lord, perhaps. I know there's times when we've been out in the garden talking about mistakes. We'd be out there and just excited to be out there and determined to get something done. And then the Lord would just tap us on the shoulder and remind us, well, did you pray? And so we'd stop and recognize we didn't, and God is merciful, God is good. And so we would pray. And there's no doubt in our minds that any benefits we received or any success we've had is as a result of just working with the Lord, because without him, it says we can do nothing, though people think they do. We know it's not true because they can't provide the rain, they can't provide the sun, they can't provide the soil, nor can they keep their bodies going. But what I'd like to do is just read some things from the scriptures that pertain to gardening and the lifestyle God has carved out for us. It says, why pray? Well, because God is the source of all of our blessings, including our garden, sends sun, wind, and rain, causes the seed to germinate. He keeps pests from destroying our crop and gives us wisdom to cooperate with them to keep them from doing that. In Genesis 2:15, it says, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. Genesis 8:22 says, while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. It's a promise from God. And he's been true to his word this far. Exodus 23:10-11. And 6 years thou shalt sow thy land and shalt gather in the fruits thereof. But the 7th year thou shalt let it rest and lie still, that the poor of thy people may eat. And what they leave, the beasts of the field shall eat. In like manner, thou shalt deal with thy vineyard and with thy olive yard. And so we're going to have to remember this when that time comes. So we have to keep records. This as sure as God keep records. We need to keep records of what we're doing when we start it. Ecclesiastes 5:9 says, but this is grain for a land in every way. Well, this is gain for a land in every way. A king committeth to cultivated fields. As we were talking about this before we came on the program, the thought came is how much we appreciate LBM, correlating LBM with a king, because a king has subjects. But in this regard, LBM has leadership and they have a responsibility, and they encourage this very principle of cultivating the soil, encouraging its members to get into the soil, cooperate with God in answering his prayers, their prayers that he would provide for them. So we appreciate it, just seeing that parallel with LBM and a king. Ecclesiastes 11:4-6, or 4 and 6. He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. In the morning sow your seed, and that evening withhold not your hand. For you do not know which will prosper, this or that, or whether both alike will be good. And I made a note here because that's a challenge. To sometimes have to fight with the thought of getting out there for various reasons. Weather-wise, it can be a challenge. Priorities can be a challenge, but the reality is if you do, you get the benefits. If you don't, well, you're going to get those results. And so Zechariah 10:1, it says, ask rain from the Lord in the season of the spring, rain from the Lord who makes the storm clouds, and he will give them showers of rain to everyone, the vegetation in the field. And God has been faithful in that regard. It's so very true. Hebrews, I know, I have to tell you, there's a number of times I've watched my wife pray over what I thought, oh, well, okay. But simple little things where I see her just tap into the Lord, and I've watched these answers come by her just really believing that God hears and answers. I do as well, but I've just noticed my wife is very given to little details with the Lord. Zechariah 10:1, I'm sorry, Hebrews 13:6. Do not neglect to do good and to share what you have, for such sacrifices are pleasing to God. And I just want to say, in part, that's why we have as large a garden that we have, as well as the size of the orchard we have, is because we know it was never God's intention for us to be here just for us to enjoy life for ourselves. but to share the blessings that he's given to us. And so I'll turn over to Ayanna right now with that said.
Thank you, John. I have to say we're a good team in working out in the garden. So what I wanted to do was talk about how we started out. Now, as John said, we came here in 2017, and we got started seriously the following year in putting in the garden. Now, when we first came here, we thought, okay, we'll plow up the field, we'll till it, and then we can start to put the seeds in the ground. But as we took training in Bob Gregory's class, his 1-week course, we learned that it takes a lot more than that. We've learned that you're not just feeding your plants, but you're feeding your soil, because your soil ideally, it has all the minerals that you need. We want to have a healthy plant, but the plant, especially for those of us who are plant-based in our diet, we want minerals to be in the plants that we're going to be eating and consuming and processing in our bodies. So just like you would go to a doctor for your physical, you're going to want to know, do you have any issues? Before you start taking supplements and minerals, you want to know what's going on with your body. And so just as you would go to the doctor and get your blood test to know what let's say your cholesterol is, your blood pressure, you go through all those things to know if you need to make changes. And it's the same thing with getting your soil tested. And so we recommend, we've used Waypoint. And what they'll do is you send about a pound of dirt, and it's a very reasonable price, about 17, it's under $20 about to send it in. And they will come back and they'll tell you how much, for instance, how much potassium, phosphorus, calcium you have in your soil. And it will tell you whether you need to add some, whether you need to supplement to neutralize some things that are going on. And we have, just as a sample, and we'll put this in a resource, we sent our test in, and it came back with a chart looking like this, and it had different numbers. And next to the numbers, it had whether it was, for instance, our potassium levels were very high, our magnesium levels were low, our calcium was moderate or medium, our sodium was very low, and so on. It also let us know what our pH levels were. And your pH tells you whether your soil is acid or alkaline. And so when we got that chart, we had to go and put supplements in our soil before and mix it in. And we did that the autumn before we started gardening in the spring. Now, it may not seem like it's very important, but if it ever gets to a point where most or much of your food is coming from the garden, you are going to want to make sure not only that it's organic as much as possible, but that it's also giving you your mineral and dietary needs.
And one of the reasons this is really important is when the time comes, we're not able to acquire, let's say, vitamins or additional supplements from the markets. We want to make sure we have these things in the soil, because when this time comes, when we're in that position that the Lord told us we would be in, well, if we do the things God has instructed us to do, and that's to nurture the soil back to where it needs to be, we'll have the things our bodies will require. But the reality is we're not just going to be here for a couple of days when these things are set in place that are coming. So yes, I remember, I wanted to share this too. At the thought of when we lived back in Fairfax, and we were looking into the prospect of coming out here and doing this farming and gardening, I thought, well, listen, we're just going to come out and put some seeds in the ground and there we go. And we're going to have carrots and tomatoes and yeah. And then Ayanna came up with this series of videos from Bob Gregory. And I sat there just with my mind blown. I thought, now I've got to be a rocket scientist. I just want to grow some food. And it's okay, we can just grow some food. But reality is the soil's depleted. Ayanna is going to present some information, very important information. And we're actually instructed in the spirit of prophecy that we need to nurture the soil, build it back up. And today it's just terribly depleted of what our body needs, much less the soil. And so that's why I'm very grateful for a good wife who God uses to inspire me to do the right things. And I went to school with her and learned these things. So I just wanted to share that.
We have fun. We have fun
Yeah.
together. Now, I should tell you too, what we're learning is when you have, the more minerals you have in your food, the more flavor your food tends to have. Now, just to give you an example, when we plant our tomatoes require a lot of calcium. And if you don't have enough calcium in your soil, those of you who do garden, you find that you have a bottom rot. It's on the bottom of that tomato. When it starts to ripen, oftentimes it'll get black on the bottom. And that's because you don't have enough calcium. So we're learning, when I plant my tomatoes, for instance, I will put a heaping teaspoon of lime, which is calcium, at the bottom of the hole before I put the tomato in. Another thing, just to give you some examples, other examples of your minerals, we like blueberries. We planted a lot of blueberries here, and we found after we got the test that our soil, it's acidic, but it's very close to being alkaline. And blueberries like they like a high acidic soil. And so for that section of the field, we have to put in sulfur, which makes the soil more acidic. And so it's these types of things that we're learning. If we didn't put that in there, the blueberries would be rather bland. So when you do your pH test, as we mentioned, you find out what the pH balance is. You find out if your soil has the proper minerals, not only for, as we said before, not only for what your plant needs, but what you need. The plants, I don't believe, need boron, but we need boron. The plants may not need copper, but we need, they may need a little, but we need those same minerals and elements in our bodies. For after all, we came from the earth also. Some other things you want to do when you're planting your garden is you want to make sure that you're starting your garden in the full sun. Some plants will tolerate a little shade, but if they don't get enough shade, you may have a lot of leaves, but no fruit. If possible, you want your garden to have southern exposure. If you're limited in where you can put it, just do the best you can. But if you have the choice and you're able to have your garden facing south, it's equivalent to being 600 miles more further south than where you're located. Also, you want to make sure that you have good drainage. You don't want to put your garden where water is going to sit there because it can make your roots rot. And the last thing that that's really important and something that we have learned is accessibility for you and also security for your plants. An example of this is we do have, being out here in the country, we do have a lot of animals. And so we put a fence up, and John's put in a number of things to block animals. We've had rabbits, we've got groundhogs, and we've got deer. And so John we did a high fence, a medium and a higher fence for the deer. They're not able to jump over the fence that we have, but he also put a fence using plastic chicken wire to keep rabbits and groundhogs from digging in. Now, this could be a problem. This may not be so much of a problem for you with deer where you are, but you probably do have cats. And one thing we have also learned is when you're digging up dirt, cats love loose dirt because they'll come in and use they'll use your garden for a litter box if you don't stop it. And if you're not able to put a fence around it, cats don't like they don't like black pepper. They don't like cayenne pepper. And if you sprinkle that around, it should help to keep them from coming in. But each time it rains, you'll have to put fresh pepper down. And that's just a few of the things. Also, we recommend that you use natural or organic fertilizers and pesticides. Now, often artificial pesticides and fertilizers have harmful ingredients. So it would take a long time to get into all the different ones. So I just would encourage you to do your research and read your labels. Now, I'll admit, when I first started out, I had one of my first gardens. I went out and I was using Roundup, and I'm ashamed to admit it, but I'm going to just be real honest with you. Not here, but when I was living in Washington, D.C., I lived in an apartment and I did not have a garden, but I was able to sign up to, in a community garden, and I was able to get a small plot. So when I went there, it hadn't been weeded in a long time, and I was using Roundup. I mean, I know a lot better now. So you don't want to use anything like that. They're not good for your plants. It doesn't disappear like they'll tell you it's gone in a couple of days. It's not, and it will even affect you, and it will affect your gut health. We use what's called BT as a pesticide here, and that stands for Bacillus thuringiensis. I don't know whether I'm saying that correctly, but it's a type of bacteria that lives in the soil, and it's toxic to some insects when consumed. Now, you'll also hear about a pyrethrin, which is also organic, and it's derived from a type of chrysanthemum, which many of you know is a flower. We do not use that one because our understanding is that it also kills beneficial insects like bees, and we want them to come around and help to pollinate our plants. And neem oil is another type of pesticide that can be used. Now, as far as fertilizers are concerned, we use spray and grow. We use a foliar feed, and we also use things that we'll put in the soil. You can use sprays. You can even use untreated grass. When you cut your grass, you don't have to throw it away. My neighbor, Marion Calhoun, has shown me that when her grass is cut, she puts that cut grass on her potatoes, and the nitrogen helps to develop the tubers underground. And there's just a number of things that you can use as natural or organic fertilizer. I think most of our audience knows not to use GMO seeds. What they often do is not only are they harmful, they're using genes from humans and animals, so we don't want to use them. And sometimes the plants will be what's put into the genetic modification is they will not reproduce the following year. Sometimes they're made so that you have to continually buy the seed the next year. So we recommend using heirloom, non-GMO. Hybrid seeds are good, and sometimes they're labeled F1 or organic seeds, but all of those are good. The only issue that I find with F1 seeds is if I could say, they're crossbred between two different parents, which is fine. But if you save the seed, it may not have the same attribute that you got when you grew, let's say that tomato or the cucumber, it may take on some of the negative attributes of one of the parents. And it's usually after 7 cycles of growing that you can get something that's reliable if it's not an heirloom. Compost is important to do, and this is something that John and I are still working to master. It's we're still trying to get this right. But composting improves the soil structure. It helps to produce good quality food. It gives it the good minerals. And as we said earlier, rich minerals gives you good flavor. If a food is bland, usually it's an indication that the mineral level is low. And some examples of organic plant nutrient sources include animal matter and animal byproducts, which are not recommended because when I say animal byproducts, it might be bone meal. And you'll see this sometimes in some of your bags of fertilizer. It could be manure, but was the manure from a cow that was out in the field, or was it from a cow that was in a Chicago yard? So you really don't know a lot of times where your manure is. So it's generally not recommended. You can also use compost using your crop residues, cover crops, which we did last year. The main part of our field, we put seed in to increase aerating it, to increase nitrogen. And it was basically a lot of like wild radishes and greens, turnips. And we just let that, put the nitrogen and the other minerals in there. We did not pick it to eat. We wanted to stay in the soil. And when our 5 inches of snow melts and it's dry enough, we're going to plow it under for this year's crop. Seaweed is good in your compost, and mined minerals such as iron and zinc are good to add in the right proportions. And red clover and other legumes are good organic sources for your garden, for your compost. Journaling and labeling are really important. John is always asking me, did you journal? Do you know what we planted? Because you want to make sure you keep a journal, because 2 years from now, you may forget where you grew your corn. And you want to make sure that you rotate your crops.
Also, it helps me make plans so I know what I expect a month from now or what's coming at me. By Ayanna keeping dates, that's very helpful to me in my decision making.
You really want to be organized. And I'm a little challenged. As John mentioned, I do like to read. I do like to do research. John is the organizer here. And I'm trying to get more organized, because you want to know, what did you plant the last few years? Because, for instance, if you plant your corn in the same spot, they're heavy feeders along with some other vegetables. And if you're pulling up a lot of the minerals that it needs, and then you plant it in that same section, you're starting out with depleted soil. So you want to move it to another section where you put something, let's say beans, and the beans have put nitrogen into the soil, and you'll want to move it. And also your insects oftentimes will come to the area where you've grown something the year before that they like. And so you want to rotate it for that reason also, that the insects do not find their favorite source of food. Some of the things I mentioned, we use a product called Spray and Grow. And I foliar feed that in that I have, we have a 2-gallon sprayer, and once a week we go out and spray it on the leaves, and this provides nutrients. That's one way to give them nutrients. You can also put the nutrients in the ground. You can mix it in, or you can pour it in. There's different ways to do it. Some of the things, I'm just going to throw some things out that you can keep on hand. We use fish emulsion sometime, kelp, cottonseed meal, sulfur. As I mentioned, we use the sulfur for our acidic fruits like blueberries and strawberries, phosphorus. We always keep lime because we want to make, we can a lot of tomatoes and eat a lot of tomatoes. And it would be really disappointing to make all that effort and you get to a point when it's starting to ripen, you get this black bottom on the tomato and you can't eat it and enjoy it. And also it's important, of course, to have a good water source. So those of you who are not on wells, rainwater is superior than using water from your city, your system. And we use sprinklers, we use hoses, and sometimes I even use a sprinkling can. And this year,
Yes, and this year, Ayanna has nudged me for the last couple of years. Now I'm slow.
this year we're going to do it.
Yes, I always tell her soon. Well, it's been a couple of years, but this year we are going to be using the drip system that most likely everybody's aware of, and probably for smaller projects, it's really beneficial and easier in the city if that's where you are. But we're going to do that this year, as well as we're going to put in a irrigation system.
Yay!
We're going to have different spigots set up because of the size of our garden, because lugging these heavy hoses at our age, it's becoming challenging, even though it keeps me fit. But just the same, yes, we are going to use the drip system. This will be an experiment for us this year. And we're hoping to get really great results from it.
Thank you. Thank you, John. So we're really looking forward to that. Now, I want to talk to you next about starting your seeds or plants. Now, for those of you who are new at this, it used to be good to sign up for your catalogs and get them about now. But I've found the last couple of years, if you haven't gotten your catalogs and ordered by January and February, you start finding that the seeds that you want they've run out. And so for next year, if you didn't do it this year, I would really recommend sign up for your seed catalogs. Baker Creek is one of our favorite. They do heirloom. Johnny's does conventional, heirloom, and organic and hybrid. But there's a number of catalogs, but sign up for your catalogs, get them early and order them. And when you get your seeds in December and January, most likely you're going to get all the ones that you're wanting to do.
I'd just like to make mention, back when we went to Bob Gregory's school, he had encouraged us to make it a point to stock up on seeds. And as probably everyone's become aware of, in light of all that's happened, it's becoming more challenging to get seeds because people have become aware of just the potentials for food shortages, and that it's wise to get your seeds, stock up on them.
That's right. That's right. Now, now that you are about ready to start, you get your seeds, you want to separate those that are your cool weather crops and the seeds that are going to be your warm weather crops. And some of the cool weather crops include your cabbage, your onions, your peas, your white potatoes, beets, carrots, your cruciferous vegetables like cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, collards, kale, those types of things, lettuce and spinach, to name some. Those you can grow now. And I'll tell you, last week when it was 70 degrees, we planted onions, potatoes, strawberries, anything else?
No, that was it for now.
And
Well, our grapes.
and our grapes. We planted some grapevines.
Yeah.
And
Some
then
more blueberry bushes.
and more blueberries. And then it snowed yesterday, but they should be good. My source down the street, I read that, these were cool weather crops. I asked my neighbor down the street, and so we're comfortable. They're cool weather crops. Snow peas are called snow peas for a reason. Snow does not bother them. So we're comfortable that we're going to still get a crop there. And warm weather crops include things like eggplant, squash, sweet potatoes, bitter melon, peppers, to name some. Now, what we're doing, I'd like to show you a video before we go further. I'd like to show you a video of what we did to get our strawberries started last week. Okay, John, what are you doing right now?
Well, I'm preparing this for our strawberries. I'm trying to do a little bit more on the weeding end, get them out. I'm going to put some sand in. I already did that one there. Then we'll put a cover cloth over that. And then same here, once I get this a little bit better, broken up, get some of these weeds out, we'll put the sand in, cover cloth this, and look forward to some Lord bless strawberries.
Amen.
Yes.
And this bed, each bed holds about what we said, 3 by 12.
36.
36. You can get 36 strawberry plants per bed. So we're looking forward to having some strawberries.
By the way, this tool here, you reach out to Brother Cobb at Meat Ministry and ask him about this bar.
What is it?
This is I call it a devil bar, but it's a hoe from Jamaica.
And what's it made with?
It's made out of steel.
The whole thing?
Iron, yes. And believe me, this thing is a great tool. You got to build your strength to use it, but it's well worth having. It gets the job done and they don't break.
Okay. So we showed you just now, John was chopping the weeds out. He was loosening the dirt. He put some sand in because strawberries do like sand. And the next picture that we want to show you is still in the bed. And John has put some cover cloth on it. And I think some little strawberries should be planted in there.
No.
Okay, this is outside. Okay, well, what we'll do is we'll talk about the pictures, and then we'll just we'll go back to the last one, and then we'll just talk about them while we go through it. So these plants are mostly cruciferous, and when it was very cold, I started them in our shed. And we had some grow lights, and I used a regular grow light. But we found that it was recommended that we use a full spectrum lighting system. And this a full spectrum light more closely resembles light from the sun. And so we've just started using that. And hopefully our plants will not be as leggy, but these are ready to go into the ground. And so we do recommend, if you can, using a full spectrum light. On the bottom, you also see a black bottom with some writing on it. We use a heating pad, which also assists in growing the seeds. And we have a tray here. You don't have to have the little compartments, but it does make it easier to take them out of the plugs to put in the ground. Okay, we can look at another picture. Okay, these are our tomatoes. So each of the seed trays has a tomato seed in there, and they're just starting to germinate. But this is a mixture of cherry tomatoes, which we like to have in our salads, what we call slicers, and also canning tomatoes. We can a lot of tomatoes, and I was hoping that more would have grown up under the full spectrum, but we just got the full spectrum lamp, and we didn't get too far with the plants coming up. Okay, next picture, please. Okay, so what we have here, we also planted onions, and onions are cold hardy, so they're out in the field now. What I did was, well, first John went through the field, he chopped up the dirt, and ideally we would have mixed in fertilizer before we did that, but I'm going to have to add it in later on. I have just a stick, a thin stick, and I put my measuring tape down, and about every 4 inches, it calls for 3 to 4 or 2 to 4 inches, but I put 4 inches apart. I stuck a hole about 4 inches deep, and just dropped a little. Okay, next picture. I think I've got some onions in my hand. Okay, I put some onions. I took the rubber band off, and each hole got 1 onion. And onions for this area, at least the zone that I'm in zone 6B. And so we would order long day onions. I'm not sure for Maryland or Virginia, you also may need to grow long day onions. Short day onions are typically for the South, but you'll want to check that out. But if you either go to a hardware store, they may have onion sets. But this one we ordered from an onion farm in Texas, and I've been really happy with the onions that we got from them last year. And so these are yellows, and we planted about 150 to 200 onions. We eat a lot of onions here, of yellow and red onions. They last a long time. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, so this is, we're back to the strawberry bed, and John has chopped things up. The sand's in, the cover cloth is there. We've cut holes.
And this is an experiment this year with the cover cloth.
Yes, and so we're hoping to eliminate a lot of weeds and still get some great tomatoes.
Strawberries.
I'm sorry, thank you. I've got my mind on tomatoes, strawberries. And the type of strawberries we put in are called, I think, Early Glow. They're supposed to be very sweet and large. So the next thing that we want to touch on a little bit is we don't know how many of you also are growing trees. I think those are all of our slides. Thank you so much. We also have trees, fruit trees, shrubs, and other plants like the strawberries that you've just seen. We have some raspberries. I would like to encourage you. These are perennials. They do get pruned, and it's important to prune them. And we won't spend a lot of time on that. But those of you who do like fruits, it's a good investment to put in your small fruits, your medium fruits like your grapes, your raspberries, your blueberries, and then your fruit trees like your peaches, pears, and apples and things like that. Now, one thing I want to mention that I learned from a farmer this year, for those of you who do have fruit trees, I sprayed for pesticides last year when the fruit was, the worms were getting in them. And I went to a farmer who sells peaches and asked her why her peaches were so nice and mine were so wormy. Our peaches were still sweet, but they were they would not have sold. And so what she shared with me was, when your fruit trees are blossoming, that's when the bugs are going in. They're going into the flowers. And so you want to take your BT or other pesticide, and you want to spray your blossoms about every week while they're blossoming. And that should, it should guarantee or give you a better success in having fruit that's pretty, not just good to
Same with
eat.
the corn.
And the same with the corn, you're going to, when the tassels come out, you want to start really spraying those faithfully, because what we like to eat, the insects like to eat too, especially when they are organic. We notice that bugs don't really bother Roundup Ready seed. The seed is actually technically a pesticide itself. So you want to really stay on top of that. So in conclusion, what we want to mention, one other thing I want to mention. You want, when you plant, one of the things I'm learning to do when I plant, like we planted asparagus, and it's good to find out before you plant something next to it, find out what is a good companion plant with that. I learned asparagus does not like to grow next to garlic and onions. There's some plants, basil likes to grow with tomatoes. Some plants do not do well with other plants. And so when you plant, just, look up on Google, or if you have your books, find out what are good companion plants, find out what does not grow well with them, because it can affect it. It can cut the production, and it can affect it. So in conclusion, we just want to say, no matter how small your garden is, if you're planting in buckets or large pots, use the best soil you can, use your nice organic fertilizer that you can either make up or that you can buy. You can take your grass clippings and you can soak it in water for a few days and just pour that water off into your plants.
But you might want to consider not use, if it's at your house and you haven't used Roundup, then that would be fine. But if you try to get access to grass clippings that are not from lawns where they've used those kind of pesticides.
Thank you, John. Yeah, you may, if you want to use your neighbors, watch and see what they're doing with their grass before they offer it to you, before you ask for it. And I want to, again, just encourage you, if you have a small yard, just use what you have. As I mentioned earlier, when I lived in an apartment, I'll tell you, I didn't even have a car. I signed up, they had a waiting list, but I was able to get a small plot in a community garden. And I got on the bus with my my tools. I don't know whether they would allow you to do it anymore. I mean, it wasn't a weapon, but I got on with my hoe and my shovel. I'm sure I was quite a sight. But I caught the bus and I went to the community garden. So I just want to encourage you, there's ways to make it work, whether you're practicing while you're in the city before you can come out. And those of you, John made a really good idea, made a good suggestion. Those of you who have a big yard, consider those who don't have a yard, offering to let them use a part of the yard to have a little garden. You can start a community garden with a few of your friends to come out there. And not only will the garden, being out in that garden, help your soil and your plants, but it's going to help you with your vitamin D. It's going to help you stay healthy. It's going to build up your muscles. And we call it free. When we're out in the garden, we say we have a free gym membership.
Yes.
And so we want to encourage you to garden. And I just want to just tell you, there's nothing like, as you all know who have gardened already, there's nothing like harvesting your own food. It's better than getting a gift. There's nothing like digging down in the ground and digging up potatoes or digging up your sweet potatoes. And I just want to encourage everyone, and I hope this was an encouragement to everyone watching this program this evening. Thank you very much.
Well, I have to say thank you so much, John and Ayanna, because I grew up in a house of gardeners, and I love gardening. I did it when I was younger, when I had to go out to, and I want to get right to the questions because we had a lot of questions, and I promised everybody that I would get all their questions during this time. And then afterwards, we can share tips and notes. So we had a question. Our first question was from, where are we? Okay, D. Robinson wants to know about rabbit droppings. And I'm assuming they are referring to in the compost. Would rabbit droppings be a good thing to put in your compost?
I have read where people are using rabbit droppings, but I would discourage it because I know they carry a parasite. And we even have neighbors here who have offered their cow manure, goats, and we would use some goat manure, but we don't know what they're feeding them.
Yes.
But I would really encourage people to only, if you're going to use animal products and manure, to use manure from clean animals and not from unclean. But I know rabbits carry a parasite.
I think it depends on what your concern is.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, your priority.
I'm getting into compost after many years, and I find the compost that I like best is what I have done myself, and that's
Yes.
primarily kitchen scraps and old leaves. And in that vein, that raises a question that I had, which was about worms. Now they use worms in composting, and I'm wondering if you guys use worms in your garden and in your composting.
Excellent. Yes, we do. We love, and I'll tell you, there's worm castings are some of the best things you can put in your garden.
Yes.
So we do everything we can to encourage worms, and it's excellent. It's an excellent source.
We were challenged when we first got here because we didn't see any worms.
Mhm.
But by building up the soil,
Yes.
doing the things that we knew to do, we have worms today.
Wonderful. So you didn't order your worms?
No, we thought about it. But I think what made us hesitate, we didn't know what we would do with them in the winter. But if for anybody who wants to do vermiculture, we would really encourage it. But they will die off if it gets really hot and you can't keep them cool. And it might be a challenge in the winter time.
Yes. And they can be kind of expensive. So if you're going to use the worms, you need to probably cultivate your own. Yeah. Now, Sherry had a question. She says that she uses scraps, and I'm assuming she's meaning kitchen scraps in her garden, and she wants to know if that's good. And my question on top of that would do with whether we should try to just throw the scraps out in the garden, or should we try to compost them?
Well, when we were at Meat Ministry, they brought in all the scraps from the kitchen, and Brother Cobb would throw everything under a black tarp, put some layer of soil on top of that. He would make his own compost.
Yes.
They did use the kitchen scraps. However, it's been pointed out to us not to use certain items in your composting. And that was
banana peels, because sometimes they're sprayed.
Yes.
Orange peels.
Citrus peels. They,
yes.
For the same reason, they say they tell you to avoid using that.
But when we juice, we do carrot juicing, and we use celery in it and beets. Anything we have left over like that, we'll put out in the compost.
Definitely put in the compost. But yeah, I've tried doing just the scraps in the garden. It does not work. It just attracts bugs. And then the decaying of you have more decay than you have the releasing of the nutrients of the vegetables into the ground, because molds come, and that's never good. So I personally recommend that you compost it and not just throw the scraps into the garden.
Yes, it'll also draw rodents too.
Yes, exactly.
Something you have to
That's
be aware
a
of.
big no-no for me.
Yeah.
So let's see, TT wants to know, how big is your garden?
Yes, that's, well, our garden is 1.5 acres.
Yes, I thought
So
that's what
big.
I
That's,
heard.
pardon?
I thought that's what I heard.
Yeah.
An
Yes,
acre and a half.
It's
That's
big.
a big garden.
My wife likes to keep me in shape.
Good.
I'm out there with him. I'm out there with him. He's not out there by himself.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
It's always better when you have company.
Right.
And TT also asked, you mentioned the school where you went to, where you received training. Do you know if they are offering that training, or do you know someone else who might be offering the training?
Yes, so if she's asking about the 1-week course, Berea Gardens does still offer the training. I looked up their website maybe a week or two ago, and what I can do is a lot of the resources that I referred to, or I may not have referred to them, but they're helpful, I will send in to LBM to make them available to other people. But he does, he is still teaching.
And if you like good food, they have,
Oh my.
his wife is a tremendous cook.
I would
Wow.
go, I would take the course just for her cooking. She is an excellent cook, and it's all plant-based.
Okay, great.
It is, she could open a restaurant.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Sounds like my kind of friend.
Yeah.
So Veronica Ann wants to know, what do you do for seeds from organic foods eaten, such as citrus seeds? How do you sprout these seeds?
Okay, so I do sprout the seeds. Now, what I will do is,
Excuse me, the question wasn't sprouting. It was, how do you save those seeds and reuse them?
okay.
I didn't know you can sprout citrus seeds. I meant when you eat, when you buy an organic, non-GMO piece of fruit, it has
Mhm.
seeds. I want to know, how do I save those seeds? Because I'm not sure I'm doing it right.
Okay, so I've done it. I have grown fresh seeds to make lemons and to make lemons. I have bought seeds that were dry because there's like, I like a Thai lime. I'm trying to grow my own herbs for cooking, and they're dry. And I think you should do well. Once they're dry, make sure they're dry. Because once I saved seeds, I thought they were dry and they weren't, and I sealed them and they molded. So really make sure your seeds are dry. If you're not going to grow them right away, I would put them in a really good seal and then keep them in a cold environment, in the dark, in possibly in the refrigerator or a freezer, and sealed really well so that they don't get damp. But I have lemons growing right now, 2 lemon trees from seed, but it was fresh seed, but I have purchased dry seed, so you should be fine.
Yeah, I've grown peach that way.
Okay, oh, excellent.
I kept the pit and I let it dry. When it was fully dried, I cracked it open, the seed was in there. I let that dry as well, and then planted it, and the little peach tree started growing.
Very good.
Yeah, so you definitely can do that.
Excellent.
And on seeds, we have a number of questions about seeds. One of which was, how do you store your seeds from, say, harvest to harvest? How long can you store seeds? And do you recommend freezing them?
I do recommend freezing them. That's how we keep our seeds. Now, I want to mention, you'll probably read in, I guess, history and science books where scientists have found wheat seeds or corn seeds in caves that may be 2,000 years old. Now, they're not going to be 100% germination,
Right.
but sometimes they can get them to grow. So if they're stored properly, they can last a long time.
Yeah.
Now, I experimented this year. I had some seeds, 2015. The germination is low, so a few came up. I suspect that I did not, when I planted them, I did not store them right away as I should have. Generally, when you buy them, they'll tell you that they're really pretty fertile for about 3 years. After that, the fertility starts to drop. But if you keep it sealed and you seal it really well so it doesn't get damp, keep it in the dark and in the cold, it should last you a long time. We do preserve our seed. When I have a nice tomato, I will often preserve my tomato seeds, bean seeds, and squash, my
Watermelon.
watermelon and winter
Cantaloupe.
squash, cantaloupes. We save those seeds.
And even tomato seeds is
And
good.
tomato seeds, but
Yeah.
I do want to caution again, if you're buying seeds from a hybrid and you save those seeds, you may not get the same product. So I would encourage, if you're a seed saver, try to find heirlooms.
And I have a place where I order my seeds from. They are heirloom non-GMO. I don't know
Okay.
if you've heard of them. They're called 99 Heirloom.
No, that's a new one for me.
Yeah, I've been using them for the last 3 years. And
Okay.
their seeds are pretty good, and they're supposed to be non-GMO, and they
Okay.
started off at 99 cents per
Ah,
little pack. That's why it's
okay.
called 99 Heirloom, but they're no longer 99 cents.
I'm
They're a
sure
little over 99
my
cents.
dollar store is no longer a dollar.
No.
The prices are going up.
Yes. So I do, and you're absolutely right. You do need to order your seeds early because they will be
Mhm.
gone, and then you'll find you'll be limited in what you can have.
And if
So
I could mention about seeds also, we're learning that a lot of these major companies like Bayer, Monsanto, they're also
Mhm.
buying up seeds. Now, I don't trust their reason. I suspect it's not to preserve it, so to make it available for all of us. So get your seeds, preserve your seeds, because they may not be available very soon. Mega companies are buying up a
Mhm.
lot of our seeds, and they're no longer
Yeah.
available for people to purchase.
And one thing I wanted to note that where you live, if you can find seeds indigenous to your area, that's
Mhm.
also important, because like
Yes.
here in Maryland, our pH is somewhere between 6 and 7, which is a very
Okay.
neutral soil.
Mhm.
And that's, you spoke earlier about neutral versus acidic and
Mhm.
sweet. And
Alkaline.
that's pretty important when you're planting your seeds. And I
Yeah.
learned that lesson this year, because I started my seedlings and I had some peat. And that's going to go into a question I wanted to ask you, because you said that you used to make your acid, sulfur. You use sulfur.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's hard to find sulfur, but I know that peat is also good for changing the soil, the more acidic soils,
Mhm.
changing the soil to more acidic. And so I had planted some tomatoes, and trying to think what else I put in the regular soil. And I noticed they weren't reacting, and they didn't come up like the others. So it dawned on me, tomatoes like an acidic environment. So I put some new seeds in the peat, and they came right on up. So this is where pH is important, because knowing what vegetables do well in one environment is very helpful in whether or not you're going to have a good crop. So
And
we got some more.
what you're
questions.
mentioning also about the peat, when you're using that for your seedlings, it's a sterile environment also. So
Yes.
your seed is going to come up, and no weed seeds until it's
Right.
big enough to fight for itself.
Yeah.
So it is a good source along with some others.
And it's a little more readily available. And
Yes.
in fact, I found trays. Somehow they managed to dehydrate the soil into these little pellets, and they sell the trays with the pellets. And all you have to do is add water and put your seeds, and it's good to go. So
Okay.
that's going to,
Coconut core is another one.
yes.
It's becoming very popular too. And then there's some, you can make your own. The internet is very helpful. You can go online and it will tell you, what you need to mix to keep the soil light to start your seedlings.
What do you feel about the Pearlite? Because I know that that's becoming very popular about the Pearlite, adding Pearlite to your soil.
We use a formula that adds perlite, and it keeps it light.
Okay.
Because you don't want, when you're starting your seedlings, you don't want them in a heavy soil to start.
Okay. Well, I don't want to miss any questions, so I'm going to get back to the questions. And Adrienne wanted to know, what spray are you using for your fruit trees?
For spray, for fertilizer or for pesticide?
I think it's to counteract the bugs.
Okay, so we use BT.
Okay.
And as I mentioned, BT it's a type of bacteria.
Yes.
And they may, it's organic. Organic does not always mean harmless. I'm trying to see whether we should spray it towards evening, because again, we don't want to kill the bees. But it's a pretty safe one. But you might want to do a little more research. But we do use BT, and as John had mentioned, neem oil mixture could be a good one for your trees. But there's several out there that you can use for pesticides.
And I just like to make a point. Ellen White said, if you're going to lose your fruit trees, spray them.
Mm-hmm.
We think that's an absolute no-no, but it's not an absolute no-no. She said, just like if you have termites, you got to spray.
Yes.
But you want to do the things you can first. But if it comes to it, spray it with what you need to.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that, John. That's important because we try to do our best, and sometimes we get a little overboard. And it's important to remember that the object is to get the product, the fruit, so that we can have it. And you can always wash your fruit and remove those pesticides.
I want to add, if I could just add one thing about diseases in plants. And it's something that we're working on, but a very healthy plant, which is going to get its health from good soil. A very healthy plant is not going to have a lot of disease. It's not going to be attacked by a lot of insects. God made insects to go after, they go after the diseased plants to break it down. Now, if your soil's depleted, you're going to have to use a spray if that's all you have. But in an ideal situation where your soil is really good, the plant itself is able to fight off the bugs and the diseases. But so it's just one of those things. I mean, we're having to use natural pesticides and fertilizers, but I think if we can get to the point where our soil is just really rich, we won't have so much of a problem with insects and other pests.
Right. We have to remember that sin didn't just affect us, it also affected the earth.
That's right.
So we got a couple more questions. I really want to get to them before. Veronica also wanted to know where you get your soil. And can you recommend a particular type of soil for container growing? Should she, can she use the same soil for houseplants as well as for veggies?
Well, if she uses the same soil for her veggies, it's going to get really expensive.
But she can.
She
Yeah,
can.
yeah, she could. She said that, I believe it was she that said that she had gotten some, because also Sherry had a question about the soil, that she had purchased some from, I believe she said Aldi's, and she wanted to know if she could use the same one. And I've even purchased soil at the dollar store. Of course, I used it for my succulents, but it's really, like you said, the quality of the soil that makes a difference, not so much where you purchase it from. And that leads to her first question, which is, where do you get your soil? Or you just soil tested?
For this, okay, so the soil, I'm not sure if I'm understanding the question.
Well, several questions. First, where do you get your soil tested? Then what kind of soil do you recommend for container growing?
Okay, now for container growing, I would recommend that she go online and find out how to make up her own mixture.
Yeah.
They'll probably recommend she use some part sand, possibly some part of her own garden dirt. And what I've done in the past, when I didn't have the money to buy new dirt, you can put it in the oven. And if it has any bugs or diseases in it, the heat's going to kill it. And so I would bake the soil until it was dried out. And then I use that, and you can just go online and it'll tell her what mixes to put in there and what plant food she can add to it.
How about what you got from Common Market?
Oh, yes. So here's something that you really should keep in mind for when the season is over. Last year, we went shopping, and the garden season was over. It was about October, and bags of soil that normally would have been close to $20, they were selling for, I think, either $1.50 or $3.50. I mean, it was an outrageously low price.
Oh, that's
we even went inside and told the lady that was working at the counter, do you garden? You need to go out there and buy your own soil. So so we went back. I must have bought about 7 bags. And so when we went back the next week, there was still some left. So we bought the rest of them. So keep an eye out at the end of the season. They tend to, when clothes are, when the season goes out, they want to bring in the spring clothes or the fall clothes, and they put everything on sale. We're finding they do the same thing. Off season, they do the same thing for soil, all your garden supplies. That's a good time to stock up.
So just keep your eyes open.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
That is very good. And I purchased soil at it was Lowe's or Home Depot, and you can get good soil for a couple of dollars. And I usually will get the soil and then get a compost and make my mixture that way. And then depending on what I'm growing in that soil, then I do other additives like adding the shells of eggs to increase
That's a good one for calcium.
and adding some there's a recipe for getting the magnesium out of the Epsom salts for plants that like magnesium. So there's lots of things, like you said, to go on YouTube and check it out, and you can get some helps that way. I have some more questions in our chat box. What's the name? Okay, we already covered that one about the name of the spray. The BT is what you use for your fruit tree.
Pesticides.
Yes. And do you suggest that we start composting our scraps? Why do I keep saying that? Our scraps now before starting our gardens. She's seen composting bins at I think this is like Lidl, but I have a simple suggestion for composting containers. Rather than purchasing that container, you can get the little what they call Sterilite containers and drill holes in them around the bottom, so bottom of the container, so that you can get the oxygen into the dirt. And it's perfect for if you're in a small place like an apartment. You can have these containers. I use soil and leaves and kitchen scraps in my compost. And you will want to start early because it takes some time. What you're doing is you're basically breaking down those scraps and you're breaking down the leaves till you have a very rich and nutrient soil. And it takes time for that. So you don't want to just start. Now, the way that, John, you explained how they did it where you were in your training, that's a quicker way. Just putting them out and covering them with the black tarp. It kind of speeds it up because of the black tarp, which kind of, it's like pressure cooking the soil. So that's great. But so that's my recommendation. But so she's concerned about drawing pests to the city, in the city.
That's a good concern.
I understand that. So, but if you get the bins with the covers, it should not draw pests. I mean, it may bring bugs, but again, like you said, Ayanna, if the soil is healthy, it's not going to attract those pests and bugs.
And I would encourage too, the person who has that question, YouTube is a really great source. We do see a lot of good sources there. And John, why don't you share how you did our compost with the leftover after we picked like the green beans and picked the vegetables, what you did?
Well, I basically did what I explained about meat ministry. I just took everything out there, threw it in, put a tarp over it. And I would just keep adding, throw some grass in there from time to time. And it just really worked. It decomposed very well. And we got a good crop the next year out of it.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes.
That's a very easy way to do it.
It is.
It's almost, what do you call it, idiot proof? That's wonderful.
Yeah, I need idiot proof.
Well,
Me
we
too.
juice a lot, so plus we were getting some nice juicing leftovers from Antiochs in Hagerstown, Maryland. And so we were fortunate to get a lot of that from them. But you can go around places and ask them, hey, can I get your scraps? Or
You need any juice
but
bars?
that's what we did.
Now, Tina 777 says she planted a variety of tomatoes, and most of them started to go bad while on the vine, or when they ripened. So I'm guessing her question is, what can she? Have you had that kind of experience, and what suggestions would you?
I did. Now last year, as I mentioned, I put lime in when I plant my tomatoes because they need a lot of calcium. I had 2 volunteer tomatoes come up in another section. The seeds must have fallen in there and they grew up. They did really well until they started fruiting. And as they were ripening, they got that black bottom rot. And I knew it was because it didn't have enough calcium. So I don't know if her question is regarding black bottom rot or if she's having spots. I mean, it could be a number of things. But I find a common problem with tomatoes is not putting enough calcium in it. And but if she's having problems with the leaves,
to increase, can you repeat what you said earlier about how to increase the calcium level in the soil?
when I dig a hole to put the tomato in, I throw in a big tablespoon of lime, and then I put the plant in there. At first, when I started doing it, I thought, wow, it's too much. It's going to eat up the roots. But I've never lost a tomato plant when I did that. And my tomatoes are, they come up well when they get enough calcium. We did put other minerals in there. And so I'm assuming that the other minerals that it needed were sufficient. If she's finding that something, if there's something going on with the leaves, go online and type in what the problem is. And somebody out there is going to come up with an answer. I find YouTube, they're very happy to share their knowledge.
Yes. And she says, thanks, she's going to give that a try. So hopefully that'll solve her problem. Actually, TT wants to know, can you grow strawberries on her apartment, from her apartment balcony?
Oh yeah, we've seen strawberries grown in planters. The only thing I would recommend, well, in her apartment, it wouldn't be a problem. I would never recommend anybody just plant strawberries in the ground because they're very invasive. But if she puts them in a container, they should do very well. Even a hanging basket, the strawberries should do well. Yes. They're pretty easy.
Yeah, hanging baskets work very well because it makes harvesting them very easy. So yeah, I would recommend a hanging basket for sure. And they are very hardy plant.
They are hardy.
They're very hardy, so you don't have to do a whole lot of babysitting with them, and they will you'll get a good harvest without a lot of effort. So yeah, definitely give it a try, TT. And if
you can't eat all your strawberries, freeze them.
Definitely. And if you have a dehydrator, dehydrate them.
Excellent. That's a good suggestion.
They work great for baking and cooking later. So I am, aside from those questions, I had 1 or 2 questions too. I don't know what our time is. It looks like we're really kind of over our time. So I'll have to get in touch with you guys later. Most of the questions I have, the others have answered. And I just want to say thanks so much. So folks have been blessed. The thank yous are coming in, and I appreciate that you guys took the time to share this, because I've learned some new tricks that I'm going to try in my garden this year. I've been waiting for, and I will say, for the benefit of those who are here online, our last frost for this area is the 20th, which is tomorrow. And so you can start getting those plants in the ground.
Excellent.
So I'm excited about it. I've been sprouting. I've got my lights, my grow lights going, and I've got it so far. They've been doing really well. So I'm very excited about it. You guys have given me some great ideas. I'm going to definitely go get some lime. I usually try to use the eggs, but because I don't have eggs, I don't eat them. I don't want to go buy eggs just so I can get the shells.
Mhm.
So I'm going to get some lime and plant my my strawberries and my tomatoes with the lime. And I am just so excited about it. Someone did ask a question. They want to know if you'd be interested in starting a class on gardening. And if so, please share that information with us so that we can share it out with them. For everybody else, would you be interested in doing a regular gardening class?
Well, what I'd like to say is last time we spoke with you in the interview you did with us, we extended an opportunity for anybody who'd like to come up here and visit with us, call in ahead. We'll be happy to have you. We'll arrange a nice lunch for you, and then we can discuss things while you're here. And we'd love to have anybody and everybody who's interested in coming. Just give us a little notice, and that would be great.
And just
That
to let you
sounds
know,
lovely.
we live in Pennsylvania, but we're only about 2 to 2.5 hours from your area.
Oh, okay.
We're right above Hagerstown, maybe by
Ah.
45 minutes. So we're towards the Maryland border. So it would be a great day
Great.
trip for you.
Yes, it sounds wonderful.
Mhm.
I think you might get some some of the folks taking you up on that offer.
Excellent.
That'll be a great
Oh, we hope
trip
so.
to come up for the weekend, just have a good time playing in the dirt and feeling the dirt between your
Amen.
toes. You have really blessed us, and we are so thankful that you came. We're looking forward to bringing you back. And I would encourage anyone, Veronica says she's already on the list. So
Excellent. Excellent.
All right,
she'll be
praise the Lord.
visiting you soon.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I was going to say, if you want to put your information in the, it looks like Tina 777 is thanking you for the invitation. So don't be surprised if you want to put your information in the chat before we sign off and before we leave. We have a little poll that we would like for all of our folks to take just a few seconds to answer these few questions, and hit the submit button at the bottom when you have finished. We'd appreciate that. We thank you so much again, John and Ayanna. Much success, a wonderful harvest. We are praying for you. And we're looking forward to sharing that harvest when we come up to visit you.
Amen. And God bless you. And thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Maranatha.
Maranatha.
Do we need to have a closing prayer?
We can, I was waiting
And
for
then
everybody
we
to finish the polls, and yeah, we can definitely do that. So while you're taking your poll, if you want to just give me your ear, I will close this out with prayer. Our Father and our God, we are so thankful that you have blessed us so tremendously with the shepherds and their information that they have shared with us this evening. We ask that you will help us to take these nuggets of truth and use them for the glorification of you and sharing with others as we go on our way. Be with each person who's here on this line this evening and bless them and the fruits of their hands. We ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.